They've given themselves permission to carry their own tentative judgments on the way things are, rather than to just import other people's judgments. If you could just stop labeling yourself and then instead behave in accordance with your own higher ideals, then you'd be mighty close to stage yellow. Because they're more objective, they can act as important interpreters of truth for the public. All spiral dynamics does is labels an observable process of change as people grow. This is a logical progression which starts at barely conscious and ends at extremely conscious. We've arbitrarily divided them up into colors, and it works out to be pretty convenient, in my opinion. Spiral dynamics itself is a very stage yellow concept which compares and organizes a vast array of ideas. Let us get into the mind state of the highly conscious, open-minded stage yellow worldview by investigating how yellow people act in the world. Enjoy. First up is exploration. So people from every stage explore their surroundings to some extent, but in stage yellow, people explore everything. Nothing's off limits. They might explore spiritual wisdom from all times and sources. They'll explore alternate states of consciousness, and they'll explore a wide variety of philosophies, lifestyles, models of society, and methods of teaching and learning. They'll consider different value systems. For example, they might see the merit in both sides of opposing ideologies, such as in kindness versus sternness, or conservatism versus change. In Tier 1, people either pick one side or the other, they ignore both sides, or they half-heartedly dabble in many. But yellow can go really deeply into both. Yellow can explore the distant repercussions of alternate value systems through the awareness of historical context, and they can map out the repeating patterns over time. In Tier 1 of spiral dynamics, many sources of information are off limits, but in yellow, these limits are transcended. No book, no philosophy, and no idea is too taboo for yellow to explore and study. They don't just study in a scholastic sense, but they immerse themselves in the material. They have the ability to test drive various lifestyles in a provisional sense, and can keep and discard various aspects to these without attachment to them, except for when they're particularly insightful and lead to big picture awareness. To compare this with stage green, green will fetishize certain worldviews, particularly those promoting equality and tolerance. In yellow, a deep understanding of meta systems will show that no man or woman can be the arbiter of equality. Inequality is actually woven into the nature of existence. So green and yellow really are quite different. So I'll give you a little example of how green and yellow think differently. Green will try to save the wild animal from its predator, thinking it did something good. But instead, all it's doing is adding to the suffering of the starving hunter and enabling the weak animal to reproduce when it wouldn't have normally, which actually introduces more weaklings destined for a life of suffering in the wild. Yellow sees the bigger picture and explores even the worldviews which allow for the suffering of others. It sounds inconceivable, but not all suffering is necessary, but also some of it is part of nature too, and this is something we must come to terms with. We can't eliminate all risk, and we can't completely protect all living things forever. It sounds obvious when you put it like that. So, the child who is coddled at an early age is merely having their suffering delayed and perhaps even amplified. The suffering of an abused child is the kind which is unnecessary and should be prevented. But the truly wise understands the potential power of harsh truths, and these yellow people explore even the harshest of these truths. So for the next tactic, we have self-transformation, and I broke it up into two different parts. First up, we have the what and the why for self-transformation. Everybody has good ideas from time to time, which are disregarded. Everybody knows deep down what they need to do in order to become a better person. Few people actually act on them in real time. I did a video pointing out some crucial tips for being free and happy. So if you watch the video and say to yourself, wow, yeah, I can totally see how these ideas would change my life for the better, yet you don't implement them, then you're simply not in stage yellow. Now, if you don't agree that they're good tips, that's one thing, but these are pretty rock solid, time-tested truths, so I don't think that's why you're not implementing them if you aren't. More likely you just acknowledge that they'd probably be good for you, but it'd take too much effort, and you just can't picture yourself doing these things instead of what you're used to. So yellow's really good at visualization. But yellow has an inner desire to experiment when they come across potentially good ideas. So back a couple of stages, looking at stage orange, people always could gradually improve their ability and they could gain skills over time, but in yellow, people can restructure their entire approach to reality. Orange and even green isn't able to do such a thing. Green is when stage orange restructures their worldview in a naive yet ecological way after realizing orange's insufficiencies. But yellow can restructure their worldview in any way, and they can do so through self-guided intention, and they can do it many times throughout their lives. The differences between stage green and yellow are very difficult to approach from tier 1, and most people never make the metaphorical leap into yellow because of this. They're just so radically different. Green is so utopian, so beautiful, and so well-meaning, and so refreshing following stage orange's materialistic greed that one feels that they sit atop the moral high ground in green, and they don't really feel any desire to find the next tier of personal consciousness growth. But as you go deeper and deeper into green, it starts to become apparent that really it isn't the highest consciousness worldview, and there's much more that one can delve into. That being said, green really is at the top of tier 1. It is by far better than the systematic acquisition of orange, or the naive obedience of blue, or the domination of red. The leap to yellow is a quantum leap, which takes a lot of courage and objectivity that our society does nothing to foster. Green's a very interesting stage too, so let me know if you want to keep this series going, and maybe I'll do a video on green tactics. So now it's time to get into more of the how to become yellow and the when. When does it happen? If turquoise tactics such as prophecy and self-transcendence seem a little too far out for your reality, it's because only once one changes the way they see the world, such as in yellow, can any of it even seem possible in the first place. If you're in orange, you'd truly love to get to turquoise, whatever that is, but you're too invested in the illusions put before you to actually do anything about it. So go work on that first. Get out of the illusion. And even in green, you've escaped one illusion and entered another, albeit a better one. In yellow, you've escaped the illusion and have the potential to transform yourself into someone who is well poised to approach these highly advanced turquoise subjects. Yellow can come to understand theories so well that they can quickly incorporate them into their being. They can have a vision for what they want to become, and they can make it happen. This may also mean they can craft very unique lifestyles. You can probably think of some examples of people like this who've stumbled upon some kind of revelation and then went on to radically transform themselves. Think of like Jim Carrey, the actor who appears to now hold a high consciousness worldview. Who would have thought? It just goes to show you that some people go way deeper than you could know. As you go into the higher consciousness subjects, this will be a recurring theme, in fact. But in the lower tiers, people are too attached to who they are, or they assume certain qualities about themselves are unchangeable. They assume certain facts about the world are indisputable, when in reality they are disputable. It's only because you classify yourself as an introvert, for example, that you don't feel you can change the symptoms of introversion in your lifestyle. If you could just stop labeling yourself and then instead behave in accordance with your own higher ideals, then you'd be mighty close to stage yellow. If you take someone who's been weak, overweight, and sickly for most of their entire lives, maybe misguided and counterproductive, then they suddenly lose their weight, they change their relationships and lifestyles and begin to portray wisdom. This could mean that they've suddenly reached Tier 2 of spiral dynamics. In other words, they've raised their consciousness to a point where their counterproductive lifestyle became so vividly problematic against their high consciousness worldview that they couldn't possibly continue to hold on to them. So they finally have the tools to fix all of the clunky ideologies and bad habits and have become like a new person. Sure, the old self is still in there, but their desires fizzle away in the light of consciousness. If you knew what I happen to know about something like mainstream soda brands, very random, but if you knew what I knew, you couldn't possibly drink them every day. So the point is that certain realizations will innately enable you to shed your negatives, and you will physically and mentally improve in a way that you can feel is right. Sometimes this isn't a perfect process, and there's no guarantee this ability to seek one's ideals and see things objectively will leave one with a turquoise worldview or even a yellow one. And for many, this never happens, but the one who objectively goes into yellow's mindset with all of their energy will be capable of it. If you think I'm talking about something mystical or magical or unattainable, I'm not. I'm just describing something many people all over the world have been observed to go through. Another example of self-transformation might be a card-carrying Democrat or Republican politician who suddenly realizes that they were just being swept up in some ideology, and then they transform their whole worldview on the world to be more objective, libertarian, and bipartisan. Or you might take someone who is a business leader, maybe a successful Wall Street person, who changes their focus to higher consciousness topics and gives away or reinvests their fortunes and into something that will improve the world. So these are examples of self-transformation. It's often the abandonment or restructuring of one's old ideologies to be replaced with bigger picture understanding and a more flexible worldview. All right, the next tactic we have is multi-perspectival appreciation. Sounds pretty complicated, but we all have our own unique perspectives. Our perspectives are shaped by our experiences as well as our natural tendencies. Most people value their own perspective, of course, but also many people will value the perspectives of successful people and authority figures. But in yellow, all perspectives are considered. Over the last couple hundred years, we've had many thinkers, authors, philosophers, spiritualists, and explorers who have put forth works which are highly enlightening, yet are not taught anywhere. People like Gurdjieff, Alan Watts, Terence McKenna, Ram Dass, Bruce Lee, Rudolf Steiner, Eckhart Tolle, and plenty more people like this are completely unknown to most people. And most stage orange researchers at least know about the great minds, such as the great quantum and abstract metaphysicists, but they don't know the qualities of these people which enabled them to discover these truths which made them famous. Orange only knows them for their accomplishments. They bring forth some good ideas and definitely get people to think about things in ways that society doesn't teach. Yellow will seek these perspectives out due to their unique revelations, which enhance one's worldview. Judeo-Christian, Muslim, Taoist, Hindu, Buddhists, and many other great religions and cultures have much to share and must be assimilated into one's mind to give enough context so that they can really understand each other. Perceptions which seem to contradict each other might not at their core. For example, the timeless nature of space-time, as Einstein has discovered, has really brought together a lot of different ideas. So in other words, arguing about timelines is almost futile. All of existence exists simultaneously. We just experience it in a linear fashion. So that's a particularly yellow sort of worldview. Ideas of reincarnation, karma, heaven and hell, morality, and other big controversial subjects become far more compatible when deeper understanding reveals these core similarities. So we have to appreciate multiple perspectives in order to get the full picture. And it's hard to do. This is why most people never reach yellow. When I say reach yellow, I just mean see the world with an objective perspective. Moving along, the next tactic is deep study. Stage yellow thinkers aren't satisfied with surface-level explanations and lists of facts. Yellow's members seek to get at the core of a subject. They want the history, the origins, the influences, alternative views, side tangents, and all other aspects to deep subjects. Tier 1 thinkers don't want opposing views. They just want to see what will confirm what they want to believe and what they think will help them succeed in the rat race. In stages such as orange, they'll study for the test, so to speak, but in yellow, that which is studied and understood often becomes permanently integrated into the self. Now, in stage blue, we have a lot of dogmatic Christians who consider Bible study just to mean rereading the Bible or regurgitating prior interpretations of the text. But if you were to take a stage yellow Christian, for example, they might look up old translations, lost texts. They might even study Hebrew, Aramaic, Latin, and Greek in order to get some deeper insight. They'll also experientially contemplate spiritual concepts on their own. They might even study other religions and compare the teachings to see where they connect. You won't see any of this in stage blue, and most of which probably these days don't even understand the ramifications of the fact that it wasn't even written in English in the first place. Yet everybody just approaches it with an English language perspective and all the biases that come with it. And by the way, I've got a book that I've been working on. It's pretty much complete. I've got 200 pages done, and I talk a lot about language in my book. It's been done for a while, but it's still being edited, so when that's available, I'll show you how to get it. And I do really break down language and its limitations and possibilities. Another yellow tactic is think tanks and seminars. Now, in stage yellow, people are overtaken with curiosity, and they'll often be willing to travel to seminars and think tanks to absorb rare, premium information. They may also even present at the seminars, having deeply studied many unique ideas. The wonderful thing about think tanks and seminars is that they're not a continuation of established ideas, but they're new ideas with great potential. Now, sometimes a think tank can come up with some pretty bad ideas, but the potential is there for the good ones as well. Sometimes in stage orange, business minds will come together and have business seminars and business think tanks where they discuss new marketing strategies and cutting-edge techniques for building their corporate empire. But this isn't what I mean when I'm talking about stage yellow. Anything that's primarily financially motivated is less often a tier 2 endeavor. And also in green, they have get-togethers and communitarian events like, I guess, Woodstock is a famous one. They have peace rallies and things like that. But this isn't about discovery, it is about celebration of reaching the pinnacle of tier 1, let's say, and hoping to instill that in the orange society. But yellow is just completely objective and going beyond societal rules and naive human desires and anything like that. Much of this is online these days, and it's hit or miss when it comes to the random internet. Many great sources of information aren't known by many, and many terrible sources are featured broadly, both online on TV, and in our society. You have to first develop your instincts and then learn to trust those instincts. Two separate aspects to personal development lost on many people. In yellow, their instincts are a key asset in seeking truth and weeding out the garbage. The next tactic is combining wisdom from multiple sources. Now in other stages, perhaps take stage blue for example, people are driven to get all of their information from one source, and they follow one strict and complex philosophy. In stage orange, people will use scientific resources or statistically proven methods which produce numbers. But in yellow, people will truly seek out new perspectives. They might combine ancient Taoist wisdom with the teachings of Jesus, for example. They'll take cultural wisdom from many different cultures. They'll take scientific findings from many different studies. They'll look into spiritual, philosophical, and scientific, and even unscientific sources of information. Furthermore, and most importantly, they look back into their own heritage and see it in a new light. They begin to understand the cultures and the forces behind the cultures which resulted in their own emergence in the world. The beauty of combining wisdom from multiple sources is the context which reveals much about one's own place in the world. Blue and yellow are near opposite ends of the consciousness spectrum, but they both genuinely share the common ideal of respect for one's own heritage. Yellow just sees it in the full global context, while blue sees it only from their own perspective. So, similar to the last tactic, I've also listed cross-referencing, and in order to build a coherent worldview, yellow will check one method against another to see if they can augment each other or to see if they interfere. Yellow can see the flaws in all news sources, and they themselves construct their own worldview based on all of the sources they cross-reference. Yellow doesn't overvalue information from elected officials or designated authority figures, very important. Yellow can refute them with ease, which at times can detach them from society, which has been mostly indoctrinated. Yellow can sniff out their bias from miles away, and they disapprove of the disproportionate trust and faith people put into human authority figures. They will respect the ideas from authority figures only when it resonates with them, and because they're more objective, they can act as important interpreters of truth for the public. There are no stage yellow anchors on major TV networks, and they're not featured very often online either, because what they say doesn't particularly benefit the powers that be among human politics and corporations. Networks don't have the patience to consider other worldviews. It doesn't make them any money immediately. In a stage yellow society, these people would be sought by all, but we are quite far from this end. A stage yellow society doesn't mean a new governmental structure, but what it means is a shift in perspective of the people and how they spend their time and money. All right, we're getting closer to the end. Next up, we have theory crafting. Most people who want to learn about a subject, take philosophy for example, will buy a bunch of books by famous philosophers, they'll take notes, and they'll pick a philosophy which resonates with them. This is very stage blue, orange, and green, but in yellow, it becomes more apparent that every philosophy is like a cookie-cutter solution to life's problems. It's never optimal. Yellow will understand that even esteemed philosophers in their philosophies have great holes in them and are completely biased, which becomes especially evident as time passes and certain things presented as true are proven false over time. In yellow, since the mind is operating at an objective level, one's own philosophy is capable of being less affected by one's own bias. Sure, it might be speculative, but at least it's original and represents an attempt at the truth rather than further attempts to appease the ego. Many theoreticians make their theory with a particular end in mind, but yellow just wants objective truth, whatever that is. We also have Contemplation as a fantastic stage yellow tactic. In yellow, people don't just hear something and then take it for granted, but they take it in and stew on it. The stage yellow thinker can get lost in deep contemplation regarding all things. In yellow, there is what is called an internal frame of reference. They've done so much exploration and study into many truths that more often than not, their own perspective is going to be broader and really more accurate than any source of information from a stage orange society, for example. They've given themselves permission to carry their own tentative judgments on the way things are, rather than to just import other people's judgments. I say tentative judgments because stage yellow thinkers are open-minded and they're constantly updating their worldview. However, they do not do so lightly, and only after deep contemplation into the subject will they end up restructuring their own worldview. They can do this relatively quickly. Surface-level explanations will never suffice for a stage yellow thinker. This is similar to the child who will constantly answer every question with why. For example, they might ask their mother, "Why do I have to wait until lunch to eat?" And she'll say, "Because we don't want you to spoil your appetite." "But why can't I spoil my appetite?" And then, it just keeps going on. And they can continuously ask why and never get to the end. And stage yellow tier 2 thinkers have regained this childlike open-mindedness and inquiry into the unknown. And the final tactic for today is wisdom seeking. In the lower stages, wisdom is not revered. Red wants to learn tactics. Blue wants to seek the information from authority and confuses it with wisdom. Orange seeks productive strategies, and green seeks a very specific type of wisdom, which is usually based on fairness and ecology. But yellow seeks out true objective wisdom. Now, if you're in green, you'll say, what could be more wise than fairness and ecology? But yellow understands there's no such thing as objective fairness. Some people have more and some people have less. And they aren't meant to have more. If you're taking away from somebody who has more, this is not equality or fairness. That's bullying. It has to come from within. So yeah, about people not being meant to have more, have you ever noticed how certain multimillionaires tend to end up going bankrupt? This is usually what happens when stage red ends up wealthy. Not always, but quite often enough it happens to them. Red doesn't have the higher consciousness wisdom to manage such wealth. The same is true in blue and orange, really. They may or may not be able to handle their wealth. Their knowledge may get them some wisdom, but it doesn't bring lasting happiness or a better world in the long term. Maybe it'll lead there, but it needs to change first. The type of wisdom yellow cherishes is the kind which enhances the whole system rather than just one part. This is precisely what green would hope to do, but cannot. So, I really hope you enjoyed going into these yellow tactics, and it might be a little confusing since tier 2 might seem really far off. So, now that you've seen this yellow tactics video, I recommend taking another look at the turquoise tactics, because the turquoise tactics video really is sort of inaccessible to many. I mean, I'm sure it's interesting if you have no idea what it's about, but having studied yellow and investigated the way yellow operates, maybe you can begin to understand turquoise a little better. So definitely give that one another look. And, if you guys are enjoying this, I'll continue on and I'll do the green tactics. Thank you very much for watching.